In 1934, a granny woman in Rabun County, Georgia, cured a child's pneumonia with nothing but golden seal root, a chest poultice, and a vapor tent made from a bedsheet. There was no doctor, no pharmacy, and no road out of the hollow until spring. Number 18 on this list was so effective that 70% of the plants used were later confirmed by science to contain exactly the medicinal properties mountain people always claimed. And number 7 kept meat edible for an entire Appalachian winter without a single watt of electricity. These 25 survival secrets were never written in any textbook. They passed from grandmother to grandchild, whispered on porches, and practiced in kitchens where the nearest doctor was a 2-day ride on a mule. And number 3 was so common that when the government banned it, entire communities lost their only medicine. Let us count them down. Top 25, reading woolly worms for winter. Every October across the hollers of southern Appalachia, old-timers would catch a woolly bear caterpillar and study the width of its brown band. A wide brown middle meant a mild winter. Mostly black meant brutal cold and heavy snow. Families planned their firewood supply and food stores around what the caterpillar told them. Children raced to find the first one, carrying it home like a trophy. If 3 or 4 caterpillars all showed narrow brown bands, people split extra wood without being told. Modern entomologists found that the bands actually correlate with the severity of the previous winter, not the coming winter. But mountain people understood that weather patterns repeat. They were reading a biological record of climate, and it worked well enough to keep families alive through winters that killed the unprepared. Top 24. Leather breeches beans. Before canning jars reached the mountains, women preserved green beans by stringing them on thread and hanging them from the cabin rafters to dry. They called them leather breeches because the dried pods turned leathery and brown, dangling in long garlands above the kitchen. When winter came, your grandmother would soak a handful overnight, then simmer them for hours with salt pork. The rehydrated beans had a deep, smoky, concentrated flavor fresh beans could never match. The drying process concentrated sugars and amino acids, creating what food scientists now recognize as a mild Maillard reaction. Your great-grandmother did not know the chemistry, she just knew they tasted like home. Top 23, the springhouse. Before refrigeration reached the hollows and in parts of eastern Kentucky, that was not until the late 1940s, families built small stone structures directly over cold mountain springs. Water flowed through channels cut into the floor, keeping the interior at a constant 50 to 55 degrees year-round. Crocks of butter, jugs of milk, and dressed game sat in shallow troughs of running water, staying fresh for days in August. You could hear the water running before you opened the door. When you stepped inside on a July afternoon, the cool air hit your face like stepping into a cave. Your grandmother might churn butter inside on hot afternoons because the cool temperature helped it set faster. Some spring houses had stone shelves carved into the walls where cheese wheels aged, and sealed jars of lard stood in neat rows. Children were warned never to muddy the spring. A contaminated spring house meant the whole family went without cold storage until the water ran clear. That little building, often no bigger than an outhouse, was the most important structure on the homestead after the cabin itself. When electricity finally came up the mountain, the spring house became a tool shed, but it worked better than any refrigerator for keeping vegetables and dairy, and it cost nothing to operate. Top 22. Planting by the signs. Appalachian farmers followed a complex lunar planting calendar carried across the Atlantic by Scots-Irish settlers and refined with Cherokee knowledge. Root crops were planted during the dark of the moon. Leafy greens went in during the waxing moon. Fence posts were set during the new moon because wood cut in the dark phase resisted rot. Hog killing happened only during certain signs to prevent meat from shrinking in the barrel. Modern agricultural studies have shown that lunar cycles do affect soil moisture, and a Swiss botanical study found measurable differences in germination rates between phases. Mountain people were observing a gravitational relationship between the moon and groundwater that science took centuries to confirm. Top 21, fat wood fire starting in high elevations where winter temperatures dropped well below zero. Families relied on fat wood to start fires when nothing else would catch. It comes from dead pine stumps where resin concentrated over years of decay. turning the heartwood into a natural fire starter. Your grandfather would hike to an old stump, split off slivers with a hatchet, and carry them home in his pocket. Even in pouring rain, fat wood lit with a single match. Families guarded their fat wood stumps the way others guarded ginseng patches. Modern survivalists sell fat wood for $10 a bundle. Mountain families had it free, passed down stump by stump. Top 20 Ramp Harvesting. After 5 months of salt pork and dried beans, the first wild food to push through the forest floor was the ramp, a pungent wild leek that grows in dense colonies under hardwood canopy. Your grandmother knew exactly where the patches hid, knowledge inherited from her mother, who inherited it from hers. She dug carefully, taking only a third so the patch could regenerate, a conservation practice that Cherokee taught settlers centuries before anyone used the word sustainable. Ramps were fried in bacon grease or scrambled with eggs, and the smell was so powerful that children sent to school after a ramp supper were sometimes sent home. Entire communities held ramp suppers in April, the stink hanging over the church grounds like a declaration that winter was officially over. Nutritional science later confirmed that ramps contain more vitamin C per ounce than oranges and significant selenium, a mineral almost absent from the mountain winter diet. Their sulfur compounds acted as a natural spring tonic, boosting the immune system after months of vitamin-deficient eating. Top 19 Tobacco Poultice for Stings. When a yellow jacket caught you barefoot in the garden, your grandmother reached for chewing tobacco, moistened it, and pressed it onto the sting. Within minutes, the swelling eased. The Cherokee used tobacco medicinally long before European contact. Modern research confirmed that tobacco alkaloids possess genuine anti-inflammatory properties when applied topically. Nicotine acts as a mild analgesic and vasoconstrictor. You did not question it. You chewed the tobacco, slapped it on, and kept working. The granny women of Appalachia were not witches, and they were not quacks. They were the healthcare system in communities where the nearest doctor was 30 miles over an unpaved mountain road. These women delivered babies, set bones, treated pneumonia, and kept families alive with plants gathered from the forest floor. The Foxfire Project, started by high school students in Georgia in 1966, spent decades recording this knowledge before it vanished. What they found was not superstition. It was a coherent medical tradition, blending Scots, Irish, German, and Cherokee knowledge. A 2003 analysis found that 75% of plants traditionally used contained compounds with genuine medicinal properties, matching exactly what healers claimed. The other 25% turned out useful for different conditions. Not bad for women who never saw the inside of a medical school. Top 17 Honey on Open Wounds. Mountain families dressed cuts and burns with raw honey straight from the hive. Your grandmother cleaned the wound with boiled water, spread honey thick, and wrapped it in clean cloth. She changed the dressing twice a day. Wounds rarely became infected. What she could not explain, but modern science now confirms, is that raw honey creates a naturally acidic hydrogen peroxide-releasing environment that most bacteria cannot survive. Its high sugar concentration dehydrates bacterial cells through osmosis. The British military used honey on battlefield wounds during World War I, and clinical studies have documented its effectiveness against even antibiotic-resistant staph infections. A single hive produced enough honey to serve as both food and medicine for a year. The beekeeper in the community was as important as the preacher. That sticky jar on the shelf was not dessert. It was the emergency room. Top 16 Sumac Lemonade. That red berry cluster growing along every fence line was a drink. Staghorn sumac provided a tart, vitamin C-rich beverage that mountain families made all summer. Strip the clusters, soak them in cold water for hours, strain through cloth, and sweeten with honey. It tasted like pink lemonade with more depth. The Cherokee taught settlers this preparation. Ground berries were also sprinkled on fish as seasoning. Poison sumac has white berries and grows in swamps. Red berries upright meant drink, white berries hanging meant death. Simple enough that a 5-year-old never forgot. Top 15 Sassafras Tea. Every spring, families dug sassafras roots and boiled them into a rust-colored tea the old-timers called a blood purifier. It had a warm root beer flavor because sassafras is literally the original flavoring of root beer. Mountain people drank it to thin the blood after heavy winter eating. The Food and Drug Administration banned sassafras oil in 1960 after rat studies, but the concentration in a cup of tea is hundreds of times lower than what harmed those animals. Families who had been drinking it safely for 200 years shrugged and kept boiling roots. Today, health food stores sell the same bark at a premium. Top 14, the root cellar. Dug into a hillside or beneath the cabin floor, the root cellar was the Appalachian refrigerator, freezer, and pantry combined. The earth itself provided insulation, holding the interior steady at 35 to 40 degrees from October through April. Potatoes buried in straw lasted until May without sprouting. Apples wrapped individually in newspaper stayed crisp for months. Cabbages hung upside down from ceiling beams kept their outer leaves fresh enough to peel and eat in February. A properly built root cellar required no energy and no maintenance beyond occasional sweeping. The knowledge of where to dig, how deep to go, and how to ventilate without letting in frost was passed father to son with the same seriousness as teaching a child to shoot. Lose the root cellar and you lost the winter. When electric refrigeration arrived, the root cellars were abandoned and filled in. They worked better for long-term vegetable storage than any refrigerator ever built, and they cost nothing to operate. Top 13, yellow root for infection. The small shrub along every creek bank served as the mountain's most trusted antibiotic for 200 years. Your grandmother boiled the brilliant yellow roots into bitter tea for sore throats, stomach ailments, and infections. The root contains berberine, now sold in the supplement form for $20 a bottle. Berberine has documented antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties confirmed against strep, E. coli, and Candida. The granny women did not know the compound's name. They just knew the yellow root worked, and they were right. Summerant Top 12. Elderberry syrup. When winter coughs moved through the hollow, your grandmother reached for elderberry syrup she had made in late summer. Dark purple berries simmered with honey and cloves, strained into mason jars. A tablespoon each morning kept the family moving. A tablespoon every 4 hours treated the sick. A study in 2004 found elderberry extract reduced influenza symptoms by an average of 4 days. Your grandmother did not need a clinical trial. She had 100 years of family records. Here is what the pharmaceutical industry does not love hearing. Many remedies dismissed as Appalachian superstition are now studied at major universities and in some cases patented by drug companies. Berberine from yellow root is being investigated for type 2 diabetes. Elderberry is sold as Sambucol in every pharmacy. Golden seal contains proven antimicrobials. These plants grew free on every mountainside. Now they are packaged and sold back at a 10,000% markup. The granny women gave them away. The corporations charge $29.99 a bottle. Same plant, same compound, different profit margin. Top 10. Pawpaw foraging. The largest edible fruit native to North America grows wild in the Appalachian understory, tasting like a cross between banana and mango. It ripens in September and bruises within hours, which is why you have never seen one in a store. Your grandmother collected them from creek bottoms, carrying them home for custard and bread. The fruit is rich in vitamin C, magnesium, and iron. It requires shade, takes 7 years to fruit, and the harvest window is less than a week. It is perfect for people who know their forest intimately and worthless to everyone else. When families left for factory work in Ohio, the pawpaw patches grew over, and the knowledge died with the grandmothers who walked those creek banks every September. Top 9. Lye soap from wood ash. Every homestead had an ash hopper outside the kitchen door, a V-shaped wooden trough where fireplace ashes were collected and leached with rainwater to produce lye. Your grandmother combined that lye with rendered hog lard and cooked it in an iron kettle over an open fire until it thickened into soap. The process took an entire day, and the proportions had to be exact. Too much lye and the soap burned skin raw. Too little, and it would not harden. She tested the mixture by dipping a feather into the liquid. If the feather dissolved, the lye was strong enough. That homemade soap cleaned everything: clothes, dishes, floors, bodies, and wounds. It was naturally antibacterial because of its high alkaline content. A single batch lasted a family months. The recipe was never written down in most households. It was taught by doing, grandmother standing beside granddaughter at the kettle, explaining when the mixture was ready by smell and texture alone. When commercial soap became cheap at the company store, the ash hoppers disappeared. But the old lye soap cleaned better than anything Procter& and Gamble ever put in a box. Top 8. The Smokehouse. After the hog killing in late November, families salt-cured hams and bacon, then hung them in a small enclosed building where hickory or applewood smoldered continuously for weeks. The smoke deposited antimicrobial compounds onto the meat surface, while the heat slowly drew out moisture. A properly smoked country ham could hang for a year or more without spoiling. The key was temperature control. Too hot and the fat rendered out. Too cold and the smoke did not penetrate. Your grandfather maintained that fire like a religion, checking it before bed and before dawn. The chemical process involves formaldehyde and phenolic compounds in the smoke that inhibit bacterial growth, while the salt cure dehydrates the interior. A single hog properly smoked fed a family of 6 from December through October. The smokehouse smell, that deep, woody sweetness, soaked into the logs and never left. Old-timers could tell what wood a neighbor used from 50 yards away by the scent drifting across the ridge. Top 7. Sauerkraut in a crock. Before vitamin supplements, before citrus shipped north, before anyone in the mountains had ever seen a bottle of vitamin C, Appalachian families survived winter scurvy with fermented cabbage. Your grandmother shredded an entire head, layered it with salt in a stoneware crock, pounded it with a wooden tamper until the juices rose above the leaves, and weighed it down with a clean stone. Over 3 to 6 weeks, beneficial lactobacillus bacteria transformed the cabbage into sauerkraut, a preservation method requiring no heat, no vinegar, and no special equipment. That crock was the family's vitamin supply from November through March. The fermentation process actually increases the vitamin C content of the cabbage while producing probiotics. Some families kept a crock going continuously, adding fresh cabbage as the old supply was eaten. The tang of fermentation hung in every root cellar in the mountains. Children ate it on beans, on bread, straight from the crock with their fingers. Modern gastroenterologists now recommend fermented foods for gut health, selling the same concept your grandmother practiced with a $2 cabbage and a pinch of salt. Nobody called it a superfood. They called it supper. Top 6. Mullein for lungs. That tall, fuzzy plant on every roadside was the mountain cough syrup. Dried leaves brewed into tea treated chest colds. Leaves soaked in warm oil became chest poultices. Some families even smoked dried mullein to treat asthma. Modern herbalists confirm mullein contains saponins and mucilage, which act as expectorants. A German study found mullein extract effective against ear infections. That roadside weed your lawnmower destroys was a respiratory pharmacy for 200 years. Top 5. Ginseng as currency. In the deep coves of Appalachia, American ginseng was not just medicine, it was money. Your grandfather could dig a pound of wild ginseng root and sell it for more than a day's wages at the sawmill. Chinese buyers paid premium prices for Appalachian roots because the slow-growing shade-dwelling plants from ancient forests were considered more potent than cultivated varieties. A good sang hunter, called sang by locals, knew his patches the way a banker knew accounts. Locations were guarded like family secrets, passed from father to son, and never shared outside the bloodline. Some patches had been harvested carefully by the same family for 5 or 6 generations, always leaving the youngest roots to mature, and always planting the red berries back into the soil. This was sustainable harvesting practiced for centuries before the term existed. Ginseng paid for school clothes, doctor visits, and winter supplies when nothing else could. When outsiders began over-harvesting in the 1970s, many old family patches were stripped bare. The ginseng vanished, and with it a quiet economy that had sustained mountain families since before the revolution. Top 4. Corn shuck utility. Nothing from the corn harvest was wasted. Dried shucks stuffed mattresses, insulated walls, and braided into chair seats. They were twisted into rope, woven into dolls, and used to wrap food. Soaked in water, they bound herb bundles for drying. A woman who could weave a clean shuck chair seat was respected the way a man who could shoe a horse was. The skill passed mother to daughter on quiet porch afternoons. When foam mattresses and synthetic rope arrived, 100 uses vanished in a single generation. Top 3. Moonshine as medicine. In communities where the nearest pharmacy was a full day's travel, corn whiskey served as anesthetic, antiseptic, and a cold remedy. Your grandmother kept a jar, not for drinking, but for doctoring. A toothache meant a whiskey-soaked rag on the gum. A deep wound got a splash of shine before honey was applied. Rock candy whiskey, corn liquor with dissolved sugar, treated sore throats everywhere in the mountains. Many modern cough medicines contain alcohol for exactly the same reasons. When the government outlawed home distilling, it did not just end a tradition, it took away the mountain's most versatile medicine. Top 2. Water witching. When a family needed to dig a well, they did not hire a geologist. They called the local water witch. This person, usually an older man, but sometimes a woman, would walk the property holding a forked branch of witch hazel, willow, or peach tree, gripping each fork loosely in both hands with the stem pointing forward. When the branch dipped downward on its own, pulling hard enough to strip bark from the grip, that was where water ran beneath the surface. Families dug where the branch pointed and almost always struck water. Skeptics have spent a century trying to debunk water dowsing, and the scientific consensus says it should not work. But a German study in 1990 tested over 500 dowsers and found that a small number consistently located underground water at rates far above chance. Something was happening that researchers could not fully explain. Mountain communities did not care about the debate. They cared about water, and the water witch found it. The skill was said to run in families, and the ability could not be taught to just anyone. You either had the gift or you did not. Some refused payment, believing the talent came from God, and that charging for it would take the ability away. Others accepted a jar of honey or a sack of potatoes and called it square. Top 1. The doctrine of signatures. At the heart of Appalachian survival was a complete system of plant medicine, passed entirely by word of mouth through generations of women who never wrote a page of it down. The doctrine held that a plant's appearance revealed its purpose. Liverwort treated liver ailments, lungwort treated respiratory illness, bloodroot purified the blood. That sounds like superstition until you examine the results. When these remedies were tested in laboratories, the overwhelming majority contained active compounds appropriate to their traditional use. The granny women were inheriting centuries of empirical observation, packaged in a visual system that made knowledge transferable without literacy. This tradition blended Cherokee, Scots-Irish, German, and African-American plant knowledge into something uniquely Appalachian. When the granny women died, their grandchildren had moved to Cincinnati and Detroit. The knowledge went into the ground. No book captured it all. It lived in memory and died in silence. But for the families who trusted it, that unwritten pharmacy kept generations alive in a place where the land was beautiful, the winters were brutal, and the only doctor was the woman down the hollow who knew which root to dig. Try one this week, just one. Brew the sassafras tea, pick the sumac berries, then come back and tell me your grandmother was wrong. Share which one you are trying in the comments. These were not superstitions. They were a survival system that kept a culture alive for 200 years in some of the most unforgiving terrain in America. Your ancestors knew. Now you know too. If these survival secrets change the way you look at the wild plants in your backyard, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Plant the seeds of the future. The next treasure chest of wisdom will open soon.